What the heck are you? Alright, looks like stream's alive. Unlike what I'm feeling like right now. Push through, get work done. Do the work, earn the money. You can't work smarter, you just have to work harder. Good evening, everybody. Hello, Travis, Crazy, Andre, Rodrigo, and Alexi Cola, and Soderbridge is here. Right. May as well just get to it because it is going to get late, and before I know it, it's going to be 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'll be cursing at a laptop or something. So let's just switch over to the overhead view. Overhead, there we go. So we've got this lovely black marble looking topside. So this 1466, apparently it's not powering on, but previously it was possible by leaving it to discharge for a while, several hours, and then it would come up good again. So it's interesting fault. I'm going to say we've probably got corrosion on maybe some sort of pull up or pull down resistor or something like that, and it's subsequently causing it to not properly discharge a capacitor, or who knows. It's the betting phase of the night. Hey, one knew me. It feels like that. I got up at about 7:30 this morning because I had the electrician coming in, so that I could get a quote on the cabling that needed safing, as it were. Kind of comical. The quote ended up being about 260 Australian dollars. So effectively, this whole home loan application has been held up by a $260 couple of basically just J hooks to bolt onto the wall. And oh, okay, this is someone else has done work on this machine. It looks perfectly clean. Kind of interesting that there's stickers in here. I'm not sure what to make of that. 2000, I don't know. Oh well. Let's see. Samsung drive. Disconnect the power. 00165 board. Solder bridge. I'm gonna have you forcibly removed with prejudice from the channel. Just prevent you saying things like that. Hey, Eddie Painter. Ah, Alan's here too. Hello, Alan Williscroft. Seems we've got a pretty decent audience. Let's get this battery out. The battery always gets in the way when you don't do things. It also makes it slower, more problematic to disconnect the keyboard and the backlight flex. You can get them out, but you kind of have to jam a pair of tweezers in there and potentially risk scratching up that flex. There's Steve K, Stockholm's. Yeah, that's true. At least he didn't say crack PC Edge. Good point there, Rodrigo. And Paul Gal. So what do we have? We're on 4-3. Whoop, can't even put a flippin' cap on. Make another channel called SMC Rebuild. This pen will easily come off if anybody decides that they want to complain about the pen being on their parts. Tony Nash, well, we're in the late stages now of the house process. I've submitted 3 different quotes now to the bank. for the repairs. There's the kitchen quote, which is 10,000. There's the ceiling quote, which is 1,600, and then there is the electrical safing quote, which is 250. Amusingly, of all of those quotes, the only one that rendered the evaluation of the house as technically uninhabitable was the one that was 250 for the electrical. Everything else was not actually deeming as making the house uninhabitable. It was just more a case of like make the house less appealing, which damn right it does. But it does amuse me that the previous evaluator said, yeah, $50,000 worth of repairs required to make the house inhabitable. It's like, come on, that's a little ridiculous. That's why I completely lost my cool to a degree with the Commonwealth Bank over that. Let's see, that was a frog. There's a green tree frog. Getting excited because we've had a fair bit of rain here because we've got a cyclone coming in at us. According to the Bureau and the projections, it should turn around tomorrow sometime and head back up the coast. It makes me wonder whether we're going to have a repeat of Cyclone Charlie from the 1980s, I think it was. We had this one cyclone and it just went up and down the coast for a few times. And gave everyone quite a bit of a concern. And of course you couldn't get, you couldn't go online and check a nice pretty graphical image to see where the cyclone was. You pretty much had to listen to the radio or wait for the 24-hour update through the local paper. Hey Miles. Hey Max, how's it going? There's a weird green thing there. Oh dear. I do hope this is not going to be another one of those no corrosion, no hint type machines. Kind of a little weary of them right now. The cane toads generally don't make a lot of loud noises like frogs do. They do make very interesting noises, cane toads, but not to the same degree of what frogs do. Any fix for 708 keyboard keys double click problem? Yep, take it to Apple and get them to change that keyboard. It's pretty much the only thing I can think of. Or spend the money and go get a replacement deck yourself. Which will inevitably fail in the future anyway. That's the downside of those butterfly keyboards. You replace them, but it's just going to happen again, ultimately. I'm just doing a once over. Have a quick look. See if anything leaps out at me and says, "It's me!" But lately, all of these faults have been a little bit on the shy side, and so, damn, if only that had been like a fault, but that's just a printing fault. Hey Nathan Hopkins. Yeah, that was kind of comical, wasn't it? About how Travis with the Apple changing back to the old keyboard and saving face, at least in their own departments, by giving it a new name, the Magic Keyboard. Yeah, Coke and Classic Coke, yep. That's pretty much the way it went. I mean, I applaud them for trying out something new, but I also scorn them for pushing it for so long and ignoring the issue for so long, subjecting people to a lot of frustration. Now, I think that's the problem. I think people would be more tolerant of these type of events if it was quickly resolved, and resolved with a solution that actually is better, as opposed to, well, we'll just fit the same old thing again. Yeah, so what was that? Bit of weirdo greeno. Paul Gal, thank you for the 10 Canadian. Does Australia have more bad storms in the summer or winter months? Summer for us. Interestingly, there's a lot of focus on the northern states because we do get the tropical cyclones. And yeah, the tropical cyclones wreak a lot of havoc, and there's our fault there. It's on the TPS. Yeah, they wreak a lot of havoc. They're widespread, quite destructive. So I'm guessing that's what the fault is. But I could be wrong. We still got to search over the rest of the board. But what seems to be a more common problem these days are the very let's see, unpredictable, very quick to arrive kind of micro storms sort of thing. They just come across in the afternoon. They beat the living daylights out of a smaller area, but they're quite damaging. And a lot of the damage also occurs because people can't be prepared for them. It's a bit like tornadoes, I suppose. They just pop up, race across, do the damage, and then by the evening it's all over. Whereas at least with cyclones, people are used to them happening, in the sense of you can prepare for them. We know what we should do. We can track them. You get plenty of warning. But yeah, the afternoon high intensity storms, that's the real problem these days, it seems, and it seems to be getting worse. Hey, Chaz Whiting. Oh, that bit of glitch on the TPS is about the only thing I can find, to be honest. Not that I'm a good measure for success of finding spots of corrosion lately. I've missed a couple. Gone back and went, wow, how did I miss that? Sort of thing. No idea what that is. The fun part of it as well with the storms is that up here we pay a fairly hefty insurance because of that, because of the cyclones. But overall it seems that the damage that's happening is becoming more expensive down south. But they don't seem to be previously weren't really adjusting the insurance premiums to reflect, but I think it's getting to the point now where they're like, oh, actually, we do need to deal with this because it keeps happening. Yeah, that's pretty much my only lead here, is that there. I should plug it in and see if it works. I bet it will work when I plug it in. I'm going to guess that the corrosion will kick in. I'll tell you what, we'll have a look at the schematic and see what function that pin has. What is this, 165 board? Schematic, everybody on chat, get that window out of here. Yeah, alright, we're on the 165, so that's convenient. And it's this one here. I'm pretty sure that's it there. Obviously I realise it's upside down, and we've got a bit of a bridging between pin 1 and 2. So we've got a 3v3, it's like a feedback. Right, some sort of feedback, and what's that feedback on? That's on 3v3 S5 regulated. Okay, so that is a pretty important rail. And 3v3 S5 comp, is that pin 15? Okay, that's a compensation network. So it would have messed with the way that 3v3 line would have been regulated. And yeah, alright, let's see if it boots. Like I said, I have a feeling it might boot simply because of just the vibrations in the travels. Hey, Rose Electronics. Okay, power supply's up. Hey, Barry West, Andrew. Thank you for that, Andrew. Yeah, there we go, see it powers up. Current's about right, yep, it's moving around, so it's not just locked in a steady state, which is a bad thing. And yeah, we're alive. So yeah, that makes sense then. Tiny bit of corrosion on that TPS. We'll replace the whole thing. Mostly because we don't know if any of whatever caused the corrosion has ingressed into, wicked its way into the actual chip packaging. And of course, we've got so many of these, it doesn't matter. The only thing is a bit of a shame, I'm going to have to ultrasonic the whole board for this. And looks like I'm running out of flux. Look at, what is that? Last little bit there. Fortunately, I've got 2 or 3 tubes left. But I've definitely been going through flux at a greater rate lately. I believe it's called the Rossmann effect. With all electronics, there's always going to be one. Well, there's going to be several. I should say several. Yeah. There's going to be points on a circuit board that are critically sensitive to such things as little spots of corrosion. It's just a luck of the draw whether your corrosion's going to land on there or whether it's just going to land harmlessly on the board. Or maybe on some capacitor that really doesn't have a critical function other than just sitting around being a Me Too capacitor. There are a lot of Me Too capacitors on these boards. Yeah, they're just... When you're designing circuits, you basically tend to do up whatever the data sheet recommends initially. Like typically you farm around and you look for a chip that you want to do the function as close as possible to what you're trying to do. And most of the time, your choice to use a particular chip can be attributed to if they have a example or sample schematic setup that suits what you're trying to do. If you find something that matches what it is that you're trying to do, then you just go and you cut paste that thing into your own project. And then you have a couple of interconnecting glue bits and pieces, jelly bean caps and whatever, just to keep it alive. Add a bit of extra buffering, something like that, a bit of extra stiffening of the rails. And that's it. Most of the time you don't bother to calculate these things yourself, you just go with whatever's recommended. Now the places where that doesn't really work out are things like audio circuits and such, where you do have to have, RF circuits, where you do have to have a little bit more of a magical finesse ability. But for general PC type circuits, digital logic and modern microcontrollers, you can get away with so much. It's just like, I'll just cut paste that, and it's not putting together prefabricated Lego blocks. And so as a consequence, you end up with a lot of capacitors hanging around that probably don't actually have to be there. But you don't bother taking them off. It's no harm if they are there in most cases. They're not going to impose a unnaturally high load usually on the subsequent power supply that you're using or to feed into the system. Damn it, that chip's gone on that board. Damn it, chip's gone on that board. Come on, let's find ourselves a replacement chip. Hey Imran Safi, it has been a little while. I hope you've been okay. Hey Mladen 1000. Yeah, MLS, they do put a lot of effort into their data sheets with the chips. Usually. And I mean, at least they update them with the errata periodically. I suppose it's in their best interest because it is the product that they're pitching. The second influencer for what chips you tend to pick up usually is what brains you're comfortable with. Like I have a long-standing happiness with linear tech. So I tend to pick out or go looking for chips to do the job from Linear Tech. I like the way they do their data sheets. I can usually get a pretty good supply locally of their chips. So that's probably why they put a fair bit of effort into making sure their data sheets are also useful. Because I figure you're probably going to go hunting for some others. Oh, Joseph King, you're welcome. Did you have success in at least getting things started? Oh, where the hell's pin 1 on this? I'm pretty sure it should be there because we've moved it in the same position. Let's see. Yep, pin 1's down there. Now, I've got some good/bad news for the people who are waiting on the open board data interface system. And the bad news is that it may be delayed slightly. The good news is the purpose for that is because I want to expand the specification or format of the data I'm working with to allow me to put in part values. Now I know it sounds pretty silly in the sense of like, well, you already have that on the schematic, and it's like, yeah, you do. But what I would like to be able to do, and I found this only because I was working on it. What was I doing? That's right, I was trying to test the resistors around the BIOS today, and I found it to be a complete nuisance to have to go back and forth, even though I can quickly go back and forth between the schematic and the board view. And I thought, you know, it'd be easier if the value of the resistor was just simply on the board view. So I'm going to expand the data specification for open board data to include the ability to have actual part values. And people will go, well, yeah, we should just look at the schematic, but saving a couple of nanoseconds here and there in itself is useful, but I think it's also being able to smooth the workflow as much as possible. If you find yourself going back and forth on something, then it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to try and smooth that out, if you can. Now, the next thing people are going to ask is like, well, can you just extract the values from the schematic? And unfortunately, there's no real reliable way of doing that. So there's no structure in the PDF or no tags in the PDF that I can find that say that this is the value for that particular part. PDFs are kind of funny. PDFs are kind of like, you know, when you see criminals making up letters using letters out of magazine cutouts and things like that. Well, PDFs for the most part are kind of like that. PDFs are just this great big collage of individual elements. There isn't, when you see a word on a PDF, it isn't written as a word in the file structure. It's a linked list of just the individual letters and so on. So it makes it difficult to make associations or inferences between different blocks. It's fun enough just searching half the time. And I can guarantee you, if you try to make a guess and it works for one PDF, it will probably not work for the next PDF. Yeah, Crazy J, it's more of, like I said, it's just a case of the data in the PDF is not in a format that's suitable. To be fair, it depends on the board view format. There are formats out there that will carry the values, and Flexboard View will present them. The FZ format from ASUS has it, and you will find if you bring up some FZ files in Flexboard View, it will show the values. I shouldn't mess with that. It's in a pretty good position. I shouldn't F with it. It's just this little bit of a drag on the side here is driving me insane. How'd the iPad go? The iPad's good. It went back to the owner today. They came around, collected it, and they asked if there was liquid in it. And I said yes, and they said they're sorry that their 2-year-old tried to clean it out with chocolate milk after they smashed it. So I was like, yep, I kind of noticed that. Anyway, so that's all good and done. Yeah, the only downside of this fault is that I can only really prove that it's working as opposed to prove that I've fixed the fault. Yeah, essentially it's going to be one of those, going to have to run it for 3 days or something on the workbench, constantly beating the hell out of it and hope that it doesn't fail. Oh, is that a piece of junk there? Oh no, it's fluff. Yeah, I know, I've got to not nitpick. It's just, it's tricky. It's difficult not to nitpick. It's more the visual aspect that drives me insane. It's like in the kitchen, if there are knives on the bench top, I am somewhat compelled to go up and line them up at a certain angle. It's very frustrating. I mean, I can easily, it's not like a uncontrolled OCD situation, but I do find myself, if I'm up there, I will realign the knives to make sure they're all lined up nicely. Forks and spoons can go to hell, but the knives have to be done right. And you wouldn't think that if you look at my workbench, you kind of think, oh, he's just the dude's a crazy slob and he just throws everything around. But there are some elements that I find myself inextricably drawn towards having to correct. And it's predominantly alignments. Like in coding, when you go back and when you get your code to a certain point where it's functioning well enough or long enough, you often go back and do what we call a refactoring process, where you go back over the code, try to clean it up, optimize it, eliminate redundant bits, and things like that. But often a good portion of the refactoring is actually just cleaning up the syntax styling, the formatting, although we do have automatic formatters. But sometimes you have to adjust the way the code is written in order to make the format flow the way you want it to. It's a perfectly fine waste of time and achieves absolutely nothing. The compiler doesn't give two squats. Yeah, Rodrigo, there's definitely something about that whole symmetry parallelism. Yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect symmetry. Like if you can see a progressive migration from one symmetry to another, that's equally as satisfying. I also did a lot of work in chaotic systems, chaos theory, emergent systems. I find emergent systems extremely satisfying. Watching something, a pattern develop out of randomness, that's quite nice. And it's not a case of looking at a random set of dots or something and picking out shapes in it. They're not that kind of emerging sort of thing. It's a case of watching a random set of dots form a structure that is actually it's functional, it's derivable, it can be reproduced and that sort of thing if required. It has in a way, it changes the entropy of the system, and you kind of go, "Whoa, that's quite something." And Paul's waffling on about trash that he doesn't even do anymore these days. All right, let's test this thing. Jim Hook's surgery, as far as I know, went fine. He's been recovering for a couple of days. He did take a bit of a beating on I believe it was anesthesia. Anesthetic was hit him a bit harder than he was expecting. Likewise, the doctor wasn't expecting it as much. But at this point, I think they're just waiting on pathology results and getting a schedule. Chaos theory, yeah, well, that's weather in general, isn't it? Butterfly effect, that sort of stuff, that's all chaos theory. Mandelbrot system, well, Mandelbrot was just a guy that sort of helped bring it all into the forefront of the math and science community. He was one of the weather people, and it's sort of what got him started with the whole thing. It was like he was looking at the data and you could see it. There was a pattern in it, but there also wasn't. Yeah, it was this sort of intractable behaviour that was going on. So, alright, well, anyway, that's all booting and fine. So I'm not surprised. Like I said, it was the fact that it would misbehave like that and then comes good after shipping. It's like I said, I think it was last night. If you get that sort of thing happening, it's usually some sort of piece of corrosion sitting on a pin, just making things borderline. Hey, Keith McDermott. And Bruno Pazos. Yeah, fractals, that's the other term for it. Fractal geometry, fractal dimensions. There's lots of different... There was a big rush to come up with the next big term that everybody's going to use back in the 80s and 90s to describe all these systems that were coming out. There's too much junk on there. Jaden E, thank you for the £4.99. Well, actually, £4.99. Will that get me a pint down the local pub, will it? Soderbridge, I'm sorry that you are critically disappointed at the outcome of this event. And when I say I'm sorry, I'm not sorry. What am I doing? I'm going backwards here. Have you had any thoughts about Apple updating the MagSafe? Right, yes, well, the last time that was brought up in the chat, I was at that time still under the impression that they were just reappropriating the name MagSafe for their phones and all that. Now I see, of course, there is the new MagSafe, which is actually going to be like the original MagSafe. I mean, what the hell, Apple? Come on. Come up with a different name. Stop. There must be a war going on between the marketing departments to use MagSafe in such an ambiguous manner now. It's just confusion all around. But I'm happy to see the return of it. I think it was definitely a key feature of MacBooks. I mean, it saved a good number of MacBooks, but it also maimed a hell of a lot of MacBooks too, because often what would happen is that there was still the magnetic attraction was still strong enough that it would allow the laptop to pivot off the bench top enough that it would still fall over. I mean, it wouldn't be at the full force, but it'd be enough. And so subsequently you tended to find that the dents in the corners of things like 1466s, 1502s were generally always in the same. There was a bias in the corner, which corner it was going to get damaged, because of the fact that the MagSafe still had enough strength to pivot the laptop off the bench. The upside is that it probably saved a lot of people breaking their necks, because more often than not, what will happen is that if you get snagged up in a cable, you go head over. Whereas at least with the MagSafe, you'll get that initial sort of shock and snare you, but it generally shouldn't trip you entirely. Steve K, tell the customers when they pick up next time I have to just throw the laptop around the room and get it going again. Ha! Yeah. It's a shake and bake type laptop, so it works for another half hour. Yeah, that should be something that gets coined. Shake and bake laptop. Although I know shake and bake's already taken. Okay, let's see if this thing boots. Let's see, I've got my flexes in. Yeah, good enough. I'm not sure how long it's going to take for the bank to come back to me. I have tried to impress upon them that, hey, that just rebooted. I think that might have been, though, because of the MagSafe. We may have yet a problem. Here to go. Let's see. Because I don't have a battery in it, obviously if there's any glitch in the MagSafe power delivery, it's going to immediately reboot. Do you still recommend the Wear OS drivers? Yes, I still use them. I recommend the big fat roll one that they have. A very nice set. Ow! Oh! Ow! Is this booting? Yeah. This one here. Very nice. Full set of drivers that you're pretty much ever going to need, and they're color coded. Makes it a lot easier to quickly whip them out and grab the right one. Yeah. Definitely an excellent value for money kit. I certainly recommend it. It's got the front pressed with the back again. There. Teresa, well, the Cyclone is having multiple thoughts about where it's heading. It's got the two large high pressure systems from down south kind of influencing it a fair bit. Okay, temperatures are good. Wi-Fi only shows A, which is good, because that's all that should, because there's no antenna connected. Which means it only is only going to pick up that one router that's about 1.5 meters away from me. So we've got 1.6 Intel i5, 4 gigs. Okay, so that's fine. Sort of a mid-range, early 2015. Interesting that they're only putting 4 gigs into them even at 2015. Alright, well, we'll put that through proper testing after I've done the ultrasonic clean on it. Shut down. Is that it? I believe it is, yes. Yeah, if you go onto the tools page, it should be up there. Now I'm going to have to find out. Yeah, it's there. Let's see, schematic. Okay, I mean, so I've got the Amazon version, but yeah, it depends on your local provider. 138. Yeah, it seems okay. That's Australian dollars, I think. For me, I think that's converting to Australian for me. But anyway, it seems like that's expensive. But given that that works out to less than $10 a driver, and some people may say, well, I can get a whole set for $10, and it's like, yeah, you can, but they don't fit properly. They grind out. They mess up your screw heads. You know, getting this set, the quality of these drivers is substantially better than. Yeah, I see a lot of the ones coming out of China, and yeah, some of them aren't too bad, but let's see. But I find that yeah, there's always some kind of an issue, like maybe the spinner at the top doesn't work right, or it gets squeaky after a while, or maybe the shaft is too long. This is actually a long shaft. I prefer the shorter shaft when it comes to these things. This here is probably the most used one I've got. This is a TX5, so it's a Torx number 5, and that's the one that we take out most of the MacBook 12, 13, 14, 15 type year models drivers with. And you know, it works well. And then, like I said, you can get the. Well, this is a pretty typical sort of Chinese type one. It's this nice, what do you call it? Is that anodways? Whatever. Anyway, it's a nice chunk of metal. It's got the pretty colours on it. It feels solid. The spinner's not too bad, but after a while, you start to realise it's probably not the best thing to have moderately heavy metal drivers around these boards, because if you think about it, if you just drop it and it hits the edge of a resistor somewhere and it chips that resistor, you might not realise that. So yeah, and it can always potentially cause a short circuit, although this coating, this process does make it non-conductive. But then again, there's all these exposed areas as well. I mean, agreeably, the shafts themselves, they will conduct electricity, but you tend to have a better control overall with the right sort of shape and size, and you're less likely to encounter a stumble, a drop, or anything like that. The other thing is the coating that they put on the end of these does seem to help a lot in the grip. So yeah, so I guess what I'm saying is that sure, it's $140, let's say 150, but you do it once and it lasts you for years. And as they say, it's the pain of paying the extra expense now fades away very quickly. But if you keep buying the cheaper stuff, you're living with that pain of it's not quite doing the job every day, and you may end up damaging your boards, or more likely to. Yeah, I'm sure there are some good ones out there that people love and recommend. I mean, that's fine. I found I started out with these because it was all I could get that would work with the various screw heads that we have for these things, like the pentalobes and stuff like that. But once we started producing them, then I changed over, and I'm much happier now for it. 230 Australian dollars. That's still not a massive price given the amount of work that you put through with these. The other option you can go for is to just buy them individually. Most of the stores will let you do that. That's what I did for my first set. I just went along and individually picked them up. But at the end, by the time I picked up all the Torx and everything else, I probably spent way more than $230 So it would have been better off initially, if it had been available, to just get that roll there. Teresa, aren't you're beyond your teenage years. Why? Just kidding. You do what you gotta do. Let's see. What software do you use to test MacBook hardware? There's a few different things. What I generally use now is, well, what you've seen here, and that is, it's just an installation of High Sierra. I'll put it onto a USB stick. These are 32 gig sticks. And on that I have things like the keyboard tester, what else? And then you run the FaceTime to check the camera. You run the speaker settings. What else was there? There was the Valley test for the loading of the CPU. You run the hardware info to get the temperatures and the fan speed. So it's a collection of all the different little things, and it works well. The nice thing about this setup is that it'll work on almost every model that I can think of, and particularly with this one, it's got the USB-C as well as the USB-A, so it works on pretty much all of them. There are, of course, things like the ASD boot systems or testing systems. I generally don't find myself using them that much. Occasionally I'll have a need for it, but not so much. For the 2013 and earliers, there is a thing called the Mac Resource Inspector stick. That can be useful too, but like I said, the problem is it is limited to 2013 or earlier. You can patch it so it works to 2014 and earlier. It is a convenient little suite. It fits on a USB stick, but I haven't used it in quite a while now. I'm finding generally just a bootable Mac OS works fine. Tony, yeah, I do have the hardware sensors on this one as well. Let's see. Billum, yes, money generally equals quality. I mean, you get what you pay for, as I say. Occasionally, there's always going to be the occasional situation where you have a bargain. You get a lot for your money, more than a higher ratio than what would normally be. And on the other side, you do get times where you spend a hell of a lot of money and you get very little back for it. So, it's not a hard and fast rule, but it's a guideline. Consider it as a guideline. Just because you have to grow old doesn't mean you have to grow up. Yep, that is quite true. Alright, what have we got for time here? 47. Looks like it's going to be a bit of a short stream, but that's okay. I'm kind of feeling like I need to knock off for the night. But, well, yeah, this was a pretty straightforward job, and to be honest, on the daily grind, it's nice to have mostly jobs like this. You can sort of get in, fix them up. It's clear, although this one isn't 100% clear, but you have a pretty good likelihood of it being fixed. You can put it through testing, it goes out a couple of days later, so the customer gets it back quickly, they're happy. Money exchanges hands, I'm happy, they're happy, they get their working machine back. So it's nice if most of your jobs like this, as opposed to the nightmare board that I'm still dealing with. I'm going to wait until I get the PC bike kit, and when I get that, we'll have a look at that. But I think in the meantime, I may actually just present to the person that it's better that we go to a replacement main board of the same specification and migrate their serial number across, because otherwise I may never fix that board, and they're going to be getting impatient already because it's been here already a week. I don't like when things are here more than a couple of days. I mean, agreeably, my slots are full of machines that have been here 3 months plus. But that's usually how it ends up in business, is that you start out with an empty set of slots, and bit by bit you start getting these long-term residents, and at some point you have to clear them out. You either have to just say, that's it, I really cannot fix this, we're just going to have to walk away from it, cut our losses. It can be tricky, and it does creep up on you, kind of like the rubbish around in my room, which is why every month or so I have to have a purge and clean up all over again. Some people do work well with being able to every day manage this sort of thing, keep the rubbish down every day, keep the jobs from filling up in the slot. Other people like myself, we tend to wait till things get to a fairly high threshold and then we just do the massive purge. As long as you've got something that works for you and as long as it doesn't affect the customers. Alright, okay, well, that's it. I am out of here. Thank you very much. Sorry, Paulo from Madrid, for now leaving you, but you can always rewind and watch. Might see you tomorrow. Depends what turns up in the mail queue. Until then, you take care. I'll see you later.